We're recording.
So where's the button at?
It's on top.
That light?
Button. Yeah, right behind the white button. You just turn it on.
How do I know it's on? Does it light up?
Should. That watch.
Ready?
There you go.
Good evening, the time is 5:37. Let me call to order the joint meeting with the 4B EDC and the council for Monday, January 13, 2020.
It's 5:37. We will call to order the joint town council meeting and 4B board. All members are present except member Van Vessen.
Thank you, Mr. Giordano. For the record, all council members are present except Mr. Finch and Mr. Egan. With the five of the 7 present, we have called. Council, I think we have one item on the agenda. That is to discuss, consider, and act upon moving forward with the pre-development activities for the Glacier property.
Yes, sir. I'm
Can you
going
discuss it?
to get it started for us. I'm just going to give a very brief background and open it up for discussion. But as you recall, in July of 2017, the town of Sunnyvale and the 4B Economic Development Corporation purchased the Glacier property. It's at the corner of Tripp and Jobson Road, Sunnyvale. In July of 2018, the 4B hired Halfin Associates to work with a subcommittee that was appointed to come up with a master plan for the area. Over the last, I guess 2 years now, the committee and the consultant have worked together to come up with a draft master plan. I have copies of it if anybody isn't familiar with it, but it is a draft. It has not been adopted by either the council or the 4B, but it is, I think, a starting place for conversation of what the potential for the property could be. A public participation event was held on April 25th, and the majority of the feedback from that meeting was to continue with an equestrian focus for the property. A lot of other ideas were presented for co-locating different municipal services on that property, but I think at the end of the meeting, it was chosen to continue with the equestrian focus for the time being. At this point, we're kind of had no progress since that meeting, and so I'm asking you to come together, and I have before you, and I think that there's a copy of each of your spots, a proposal from Halfin Associates, and it's a proposal for professional services. And basically, it is the pre-development work for the property. My recommendation is to move forward with awarding a contract to Halfin Associates to conduct this work. And one of the major takeaways from the deliverables from the proposal is that we will have bid specs that allow us to go out to bid for development of just the barn. That's the only thing that we're focused on in this proposal is the barn. And the reason for that is, barring complete agreement on what the entire master plan should encompass, the one thing that I feel is really imperative that we move forward with is replacing the structures where the horses are kept at this point. I feel that they're not in a condition that I would recommend continuing to house them in. So this, again, proposal only focuses on the barn structure and parking that would be required through ADA. I do have Mr. McCaskill here today from HALF, and he's happy to answer any questions that you might have, and as am I.
Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Guthrie before we invite Mr. McCaskill?
Susan, just to clarify, the ultimate cost of this proposal is the $39,000 plus up to additional $3,000, so the real cost is $42,040 potentially.
Yes, sir. And if you notice, there were a list of things that were excluded, but they would only come into play if we asked for them. And the other thing I do just want to make sure that you understand is this does not design the actual barn. That following this, we go out to bid for a design build bid to actually design and build the barn structure.
So one of the items that was excluded or listed as additional is a hydraulic and hydrology study and analysis. Could we understand how important that may or may not be? Obviously, those words don't mean a whole lot to me, but I know it means water.
Yes, it does. And I'd like to have either Lyle or David, you guys can tag team as to why that's excluded from here and the likelihood that it will come into play as we move forward.
All right, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Jenkins.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council, appreciate it. Just really essentially at this point, at this pre-design stage, it's not critical at that point. And when I say that, we certainly understand the concern, we certainly understand the potential ramifications to neighboring properties. And, you know, the initial thing is to figure out how big of a barn we're looking at, how many square feet of impervious area that might be involved, so on and so forth. That would be compiled together as part of the pre-design part, which is what's before y'all tonight. And then once those numbers are established, then the more detailed calculations could be done to compensate for any additional runoff. That would have to be done as part of the detailed design. It's really not applicable at this point, but we absolutely understand that it's critical, and it certainly will be borne in mind as we move forward on this.
So it's more important after we get past this stage than it is at this stage.
Well, this stage is sort of getting the information together in order to do a proper design when we move to the final stage. So it's still an important part. It just has to come a little bit later in the process.
So Halfon Associates will have those requirements specified in that document? Is that the expectation?
That would be the expectation, yes, sir, that's correct. Thank you.
Council, any other questions at this time for staff? Let me invite Mr. McCaskill. Would you like to come forward, sir? Could you please state your name and address for the record, please?
David McCaskill with Halfon Associates.
Anything else you want to add?
Excuse me.
You want to add anything else? Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, just as Susan mentioned, this project is really to get the utilities to the building, to get accessible parking for the building, and accessible route to the building. We've still got to work with the fire department to figure out if we're going to need a fire loop and whether we're going to need a fire hydrant. That may be one of the additional services we may have to look at. And then we're going to come up with some design parameters for what the barn's going to look like. So we're not just going to go out and tell somebody to build a barn. We're going to give them parameters. We've already figured out that it's going to be about 4,600 square feet, 35 feet long, about 120 feet, 35 feet wide, 120 feet long, with 18 stalls for 9 horses on either side, and then 4 individual rooms. All the stalls are about 12 by 12. So we've done a little bit of preliminary design already, and then we'll come up with elevations based on feedback from the 4B board and the committee. And so we'll give some design direction to the design build contractor that will come in and actually build the barn. We just felt it was not prudent cost-wise for us to do the design. It's real expensive. If we, the design consultant, come up with a design that's going to save y'all a good bit of money, and you're going to get it equally as just as good a barn, a final product, if we just have the contractor design it, as opposed to all of our design consultant, structural engineer, mechanical engineer, roofing consultant. You start paying for all of those, it gets real expensive for a 4,000 square foot building.
So the fire hydrant and additional fire installations, is that, you said that comes later, or this is going to be part of this 39,000?
No, it's not part of the 39. And in fact, if you, the cost estimate we put together, the original cost estimate, there was an ad services line down at the bottom of the cost estimate. We still have to sit down with the fire marshal and figure out distance-wise if we got enough coverage and what his requirements are going to be for a metal barn. So that's...
So one of the first things we'll do if we move forward with this is do that pre-development meeting that we do with all new developments that are coming in, And so we'll have David sit down with the, Doug Key and Lyle and Rashad and Doug Kendrick, the chief. All of those disciplines, we'll sit down with them and we'll talk about the project and which things need to work within city ordinances, which things will we not have to comply with. They're gonna have to make some decisions on that and give him feedback, and then that might kick in some of these extra things that we may need to do or may not need to do. So we don't have all the answers to that yet, but this is the first step.
Understood the process. So assuming that all those inputs are given to our associates, should we anticipate expense higher than 39,000 for you to come back?
Well, if we have to do the fire line, yes, because right now the only water we've got coming onto the site will be the domestic water that will be servicing the bathrooms and water troughs for the horses and stuff like that. And then sanitary sewer we're going to bring onto the site. That's part of our design services. We just didn't include the fire loop because we didn't know if it was going to be necessary or not. So we did figure we should add it in to the kind. It's easier to add it than to take it out.
Help me again, what is the fire loop?
A fire loop, basically to service a fire hydrant, you need a 6-inch water line, 6 or an 8-inch water line, depending on how far you are from the water line that runs down Dobson or Tripp. And more than likely, a lot of times it's required to be a loop so you equalize the pressure, so you always got equal pressure to that fire hydrant. So we would probably connect it at Dobson and then run a loop and run it down to Tripp. So there's a 6-inch fire line that would run through the site and 1 or 2 fire hydrants on the site itself.
So again, I'm a bit confused. So that is going to come under the next phase of design, or that is going to come? I'm trying to figure out exactly what money is. That's all.
And I think that, my recommendation would be to, authorize maybe a percentage above what we're proposing, so that if any of these other things come up, we can move forward with them. We have the authority to do that. Because we don't know. He's going to have to dig in, he's going to have to meet with all of them, find out what they're going to require of them, find out where the connections are. There are a lot of unknowns at this point. Really at this point, what I'm trying to find out is, do you all want to move forward with the design? And, all the little details are going to have to work with the team.
Council, any question for Ms. Wade?
David, I've got a question or two.
Sure.
So I've been on this thing since the very beginning, as
Yes,
you
I
know.
know.
And we've looked at several different drawings, technical word there. And we've altered some of that because of future cost and so forth. So since we have begun to talk about possibly some additional uses of this property, does that impact your process right now, which would primarily be where we place the barn structure?
It would only impact the barn structure location if you decide to put something at the corner of Tripp and Dobson.
Okay.
If it's somewhere else in the site, then I don't think so.
So if we were to utilize the Jobson north end of that property for an alternative use, this would not really impact your decision-making.
No, we can
We
make it
haven't made
work.
those decisions yet, but I don't want to waste this money and find out that something we've been thinking about all along impacts what you're doing.
Right. No, I think we could accommodate that.
Say that one more time for me. Can you say that one more time?
Well, yes. What Jim was saying is if you decide to put another municipal function on the site, whether it's a fire station or some other use, how would that impact where we place the barn on the site? Right now, we've placed the barn on the site as if the site was all going to be the horse boarding facility. If we had some ancillary uses on the site, it could have the impact on where we place the barn. But if Jim's right and the locations in the northwest corner or the northwest corner, then I think we can make that work. I don't think that's going to would adversely impact where we put the barn. And one of the reasons the barn's where it is we're trying to work around the existing buildings so we can keep the existing buildings in place while we're building the barn, so the property could still function as a horse boarding facility while we're constructing the barn. We would put protection fencing around it, construction fencing, so you could keep the project site operable during the construction of the barn, and then once the barn's finished, you maybe have a week lag time where we tear down the existing facilities. So one of the reasons we have multiple master plan options is one of the reasons was to try and keep the facility operational while we did the barn construction.
Anything else, Mr. Bay?
I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. John Freeman?
So the couple questions I have. One, I'm looking at this 39,000. This is pre-development expenses. But I've also got this sheet right here that talks about phase one and the cost associated with phase one. And at the very bottom of the sheet, there's another 65,000 that's thrown in on that. So looking at just the cost we've got associated here, this 39,000 gets us in a position where then we could on phase one.
Yes.
So,
Well, it gets you to where you could actually build phase one.
okay.
Because what we'll provide is we're going to have a demolition plan, a grading plan, so that you can do the subgrade and get it ready for a barn builder to come in and build it. We bring utilities to the site, we bring electrical to the site, so everything will be operational. So when you have a barn builder, design build contractor come in, all he's got to do is place a barn on the site. So it would be fully operational. The only caveat is that one comment I made about the fire line. And also, right now, the plan is to keep the parking lot a gravel parking lot. We can't really afford to put in a concrete parking lot. But the fire marshal may say, we're going to need to have some sort of concrete drive to the building so that it will support a fire truck. Well, there's ways you can support a fire truck even on a crushed gravel parking lot, but some fire marshals say yes, some fire marshals say no. So that's part of the things that Susan says, we're going to have to sit down with some of your staff and figure out exactly what y'all are going to allow be done to get this, because we're trying to stay within a budget, so that we're trying to play a game here a little bit. Well, not a game, that's probably the wrong way to put it, but we're trying to be economical and get the best use out of your money.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Councilman Clark Collada, any questions at this time?
No, not this time.
Turn over to Mr. Allen.
No, good.
Return it over to 4B. No discussions or comments.
David, where's the closest fire hydrant right now? Do you know?
I think it's on Jobson. Well, I think there's one on Jobson, kind of close to the corner of the northwest corner of our site, and then I think there's another one down on Tripp, on kind of in the middle of our site.
Okay.
So it's not real close to the building,
Right.
but then we have to make the decision how much is combustible in the building.
So would we look at trenching from either location, or are we looking at moving the fire hydrant to a different location?
Well, the requirements are you've got to have, a lot of times you've got to have a fire hydrant within 150 feet of a building, or have fire access to where you can get 150 feet of hose lay around the building, so when a fire truck pulls up to a hydrant, that they can pull a hose out and get all the way around the building. So that a lot of times determines how close the fire hydrant is to the building. And our building is such that we don't have to sprinkle it, because 6,000 square feet and above, we'd have to sprinkle the building, but we're under that with our building at 4,600 square feet, so we're not gonna have to sprinkle the building, which is a good thing. But we just gotta work out things with the fire marshal.
Should we still put a sprinkler system in there?
I
No.
don't think so, no, I wouldn't. That's really expensive, and I don't think it's really necessary. We're gonna have sprinklers in the building at some point in time, but it'll be for the horses and not so much to solve a fire situation. We'll have misters, not really sprinklers,
Yeah.
but misters in the building.
Right. All right.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
So could you,
She needs her mic.
yeah, sorry.
Thought that was mine.
Just yours.
So could you explain, and you may have done this already, but there were a lot of different discussions. Could you explain what the design fee is on this one page estimate, the 47,000 versus the 39,000
Well,
design fee?
Well, y'all got a break on the design fee that y'all are actually approving tonight. We just threw a 10% design fee into the cost estimate because it's an estimate. So we typically say design fees 10% and put that into our cost estimate. So when we came back in and figured out how much we thought it was gonna cost based on the amount of work we're gonna be doing, that's why you got the 39,000. And also, we're bringing, since we're not doing a full design on the barn, we're not charging you for the design on the barn, since that's gonna be done by the contractor. So that would, so disregard the design fee actually in the cost estimate.
Okay, because there is also a 10% contingency.
Right. We just don't like to be the low bidder. We want to scare you now and say, okay, it's going to be real expensive now, and then you come get ready to put it out for bid and go, wow, look, we got all kinds of money. So
I was just trying to figure out what else we were designing. So the 47 can go away,
Yeah, it
and
can
the
go away.
59 can go
Yes.
away.
Well, it won't go away on the second, on the bottom
Okay,
part.
because the
we'd
59,
have,
because
it's
this
not
bottom part is
included
not
in the
included in
document.
the 39.
Not included in our
Okay.
contract right now.
Okay. All right, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
For me, council members, this project is one of those things that if the town wants it and wants to support it, I want to know the facts of what it's going to cost, and then make educated decisions whether or not the citizens want to subsidize 18 horse stalls with tax dollars. And so this process of going through the design and putting out the parameters to then get the true cost of what just the barn is going to be and how usable it'll be and all that kind of stuff, to me is cheap insurance compared to moving forward with the project and diving into something that's going to cost way more than we really would want to do or not. So, you know, if the town of Sunnyvale really wants to support this, the equestrian park, for 18 horses at a cost of X $1,000 per horse per year over the next however many years, you know, this will help determine what those known costs are going to be. And then we can walk into it, you know, fully transparent, know what we're spending the money on. So I think this phase, hiring them to do the initial, you know, what this states of identifying, this is what the barn's going to cost, here's additional things you may or may not have thought about, and here's what those are going to cost, and then being able to go out to bid is a lot better than asking 4B to ask builders to come in and give us quotes on horse barns, because building a horse barn in my backyard requires a lot less than building a horse barn for a town. So that's why I support doing this phase, whether we ever move forward with the horse barn or not, because it will truly identify what it's going to look like and what it can mean for the town.
I think it's important to keep in mind that, because not just you saying it, I've heard other people say it, that we're not just subsidizing horses and the ability for people to keep their horses there. The purpose of this, from the way I've seen it all along, is to preserve an aspect of Sunnyvale that in other areas of town is rapidly changing and going away. And I think that's why the public has been so supportive of it. It's not that most residents in Sunnyvale are ever going to have a horse there, but we benefit from it and we use it by seeing the horses and enjoying them. So for me, that's what we're spending the money on, retaining a key element of Sunnyvale that, like I said, is very quickly changing in other parts of town, and so we need to identify these spots and preserve them while we can. Sorry, I have allergy issues. So anyway, I just want to clarify that. That's my mindset, and I think most of the people who've been supportive of it, that's the way we think of it, not subsidizing somebody else's horses.
And I'll just add to Nikki's comments. I think we've discussed in many prior meetings that keeping that area in some type of rural form will fit in with our overall economic development strategic plan, as well as our comprehensive parks plan and master plan and all the different plans that we've been putting together over the last few years. And I think we ultimately see whatever goes there as connecting to our trail system. So it's just this domino effect, but we have to start somewhere.
Any other question for David. David, you may take a seat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I did fail to mention that I think it's 4B has $250,000 budgeted for this project in their budget for this year. So there's plenty of current budgeted money for this study.
So the proposed source of this 40,000 is out of the 250? Are there any other discussion at this time on this topic? I know we got some Glacier Track committee members here. They don't like to come forward and speak to the council or the 4B? Okay, just for offering the opportunity. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, sorry, we've got,
Yes, Javier.
So it's news to me that 4B is going to fund the whole study. I didn't know if that had been agreed at the meeting, but I thought we were 50-50 partners with the town council.
I don't know if we are quite there on the money part yet, but that's.
I just wanted to verbalize this since
Yeah.
you said work we
We
use.
already talked about the money. We've
Alright.
talked money. Let's just go through this for a second. That's okay with you? We'll come back to money. It's a bigger money issue here to talk about. 4B and council, anything else?
Mayor, I got a question, and I think this goes to everybody involved in the process. I'm concerned about this project that doesn't have procedures in place for long-term longevity. And there's a lot of things that I've not heard that could have been addressed. And one of the things that concerns me is we're gonna have a piece of property that somebody, some select 18 people, or maybe one person with 18 horses, is gonna get to utilize. And it's okay, because that's what the town wants. My question is, what are the procedures and guidelines for that? And how is that gonna happen? And how are we gonna maintain, it's not, in my opinion, just an aesthetic corner of Jobson and Tripp. It's a project that's gonna require maintaining over a long period of time. And I haven't seen how we're gonna maintain that. What are the procedures for putting people there? Who are the horses and the owners are gonna stay? Or residents gonna have preference? I think just a lot of things to be addressed that we've not addressed yet, and that's okay, but I don't want to lose sight of that, because I'm not in favor of building a project, and at some point, after the design, if that's where we want to go, then we need to have procedures in place. How is this going to benefit our town with the people that have the horses there? And who is that going to be? Is it going to get to be me, because I'm on the council, I have 18 horses? I don't have 18 horses, I don't have any horses. But how's that gonna happen? Because that's gonna be a big dissension in our town as to why you built it and he or she gets to put their horses there. So I think there's a lot of procedural things that need to be addressed, that need to be discussed. And I wanna be on the forefront of saying that if it's the 4A, if it's the 4B, if it's another special committee, well, it wouldn't be 4A, 4B. If whoever it is, who's gonna do that? And before we get into sinking $500,000 plus the money we spend into it, plus more money, I think we need to have a good concept as to how this thing is going to manage for a period of time. And I know that'll change. I mean, nothing's forever. I get that. But how are we going to go into this, and how is that process going to work as to whose horses and who's going to be there? And just to be honest with you, I want to see that at some point before we get into final improvement of monies. I want to see some rules. I would like to see some rules of procedures or operating procedures, or however we explain that for horses. I think the community needs to hear that. And I will tell you, I hear mixed things throughout our town as the support for how this is going to operate. That's not to say that anybody's opposed necessarily, but how is this going to operate? So anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
I'd like to know, the last time that I heard us talk about this was going to be kind of like an annual break-even project as far as revenue in versus outgoing expenses. Is that still the case?
I would, and, please know that I'm giving you my best answer at this moment, but right now it is a leasehold. So basically the person who operates, and any of you who know more than me, please jump in, but the person who operates and leases it from us then, collects revenues from the people who board their horses there. So, for us, in terms of the improvements, certainly not. There's not a break even whatsoever on that. I mean, we're paying not to, board our horses. We're paying there for, to have the aesthetic enjoyment of having the horses roaming out there. And, that transaction between the boarders and the person who leases the property from us is, what provides for that. I think, my opinion is that there should be some kind of protocols for maintenance once we do this, that might be built into that lease to make sure that, on an annual basis, that our maintenance doesn't exceed what we're collecting from the lease. So I do think there's some discussion that has to happen. And then, right now, we're not making any decisions about who's boarding. That happens with who's leasing the property from us. So do we want to involve and insert ourselves in that? I mean, that's a whole policy decision. I think then in a situation like with the parks, we're having to schedule people for league use, and we just have to decide if that's the business we want to be in. Right now, we're kind of removed from that. They have that through the person who leases it from us. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, subsidizing the cost of construction is one thing, but having to subsidize it, we're basically creating an additional bill that the town's gonna have to pay year in and year out. That might be a different story.
The break even should be the upkeep.
All right, awesome, thank you.
And my understanding is that is on our to-do list on the committee, but we had chosen to move forward more quickly with replacing the facilities for the horses because of the safety liability, and choosing to do that as quickly as possible and then deal with the other later. In an ideal situation, we would spend more time on it on the front end, but it's just not a great situation there now. It'd be great to make things safer and better for the horses as soon as possible.
And Susan and to Nikki and to John as well, my thought wasn't that the town is going to manage the horses. I'm not sure anybody here wants to manage those horses or any horses, quite honestly, but I think an oversight rule to whoever's going to do it. I do think personally that town residents ought to have a first shot of having their horses there if they want it. And that's going to make some people there probably mad. But we have an oversight set of operating procedures to lease if we go down this path. And we need to address that, I think, before we get into that. So, and then how we're going to select that person. I don't know how that works. I'm not suggesting that anybody up here in this room manages that at all. I'd just like to see, I think we owe it to the town to know what is the general operating procedures of who's going to get to use the town resources there, how that looks.
Well, we really never, as a board, we really never looked at this as us going into the, quote, horse business, okay? Well, I don't think we have to. We're not in there right now. Now, there will be, we will have the cost, there's no doubt. We have a park right next to us. There's a major cost for this town at some point. Does everybody in this town go in there and use that park? There's a lot of people that do not use that, but we enjoy it if it, if we want to. It's there. And I think we as a board, we kind of looked at this property the same way. There's nobody, as far as I know, on our board at this time that even has a horse. But that really wasn't our point that we were looking at. We were looking at, as Nikki had said, maintaining it to what it is. A lot of people that I've come across are definitely supportive of it. Even though there is going to be a cost for the building and anything else we do around there, which as a board, we looked at a path, the connectivity from Samuel North to this property, which is a major thing that we looked at. So we can connect from park to park to park. And along with that, we can still maintain the horses. Now, we will have, like I said, we'll have the cost of the building. And I'm sure that once we get to that point, whoever is there located with their horses, they're probably not going to get the deal they're getting right now. It's going to have to go up. There's no doubt. Is it the same people that'll stay? I don't know. But if you have a nice, decent barn there, you might get some Sunnyvale residents put their horses there. Because there are quite a few people that have horses, but they have them other locations because they don't want their horse there for, many different reasons. So that cost, and that's definitely something we have to look at, but I think we can move forward at this point and look at those costs at a later point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with most of everything you said. However, everybody has the access to our park, and whether you go there or not, you can. But when we start leasing facilities, because I've already heard this, I've already been confronted with this, do I get my horses there or somebody else? And so all I'm suggesting is that we need a general oversight operating procedures to whoever's gonna lease it. They can come anywhere in this process we wanted to, but it needs to come before we fund the whole project. So again, I agree with you in part. I think probably in whole, Michael, that it's probably part of the town. But when people start getting to pick and choose who put their horses there, this is gonna change a little bit. So anyway, that doesn't have to be decided today. I just think that before
But
we get there.
who picks, yeah, I agree, but who picks and chooses who goes there today? Nobody. The leaseholder, right. So if I walk up there with my horse today, and I say, hey, do you have a stall open? Yeah, we have 2, or whatever. Or we don't have any. Okay, I'll go somewhere else. You know,
I think we have a philosophical difference of opinion then, because if we build a new facility, a $500,000 barn, and I'm a resident of this town, I want to know why people that aren't in this town get to put their horse there before the people of this town. And that's all I'm getting at, is we need a philosophical oversight for whoever's going to lease it. I'm not opposing the horse.
no,
I just think we need an operating procedure at some point.
well, no, I agree, we do. No, I agree, we do. I just don't know what that dollar amount is gonna be today.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
I say give it to the person that's willing to pay the most for the stall.
I'm taking it to Grand Prairie then.
Any other discussion on this? The design portion of it. So let me ask this question. Did the Glacier Track Committee go back to 4B to discuss this plan, or this is the first time 4B is hearing it?
I met with the Glacier Track and I've discussed this suggested protocol with the 4B, but the order is not in the order that you're saying. We didn't go to the subcommittee and then back to 4B formally.
But the reason I brought up, I'm coming back to Mr. Torres' question,
Yes.
right? On financial, as 4B, I know they said, I don't know how many are, at least two are from 4B, right? Nikki, you and Mike, is that?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Wade, right?
Right.
And Carolyn, a 4B, right?
Right, and this discussion point that he brings up has come up in every discussion, I think, about this project, about how is it going to be funded.
Okay.
And, you know, what I brought forth from you today, you know, just from my standpoint, was that it would be, because, you know, for me, it's not 4B in town, it's just, you know, we got to get, taxpayer money, it's all taxpayer money. But for me, I was proposing that it came from 4B because they already have a line item budgeted for this project, for this fiscal year, and the town didn't. I think this discussion of what happens when it is to the point of the 400,000 or whatever it is, I think that is something that 4B and council will have to decide upon, who's funding what and how is it being paid for, you know, whether it is, you know, ends up going on a ballot or whether it, you know, how is that funded? There's many options. So for this step, I was recommending that it is funded by 4 because it's already budgeted there. Otherwise, you would have to do a budget amendment, which, you know, we can do, but it wasn't my recommendation.
What are 4B's thoughts?
I don't like it. I mean, it seems like 4B would be taking all the risk on a step that, let's say we don't move forward, then it's 40 grand off of 4B's budget that's gone to nothing. So my thought on this was we were partners and we were 50% partners when we purchased. And on any of the expenses, just the fact that we plan to have a line item on the budget doesn't mean that we should be the ones bearing the brunt of it. But that's just, I'm a penny pincher, so that's just my opinion.
But it's all taxpayer money. It's us.
But it was, when the land was purchased, it was something that 4B brought up. 4B was hesitant to purchase, 4B was hesitant to take on the entire cost of the project. And I know that was another council ago and years ago now, but it was still something that was insinuated at the time that it would be a split cost.
4B, any other comment from 4B members? Council?
With all due respect to Javier's opinion and perhaps others, you know, I don't really care where the money comes from. It's $40,000. We've all got $40,000 of taxpayer money to spend. What I'm more worried about is every day that goes by, we skirt by some liability of humans and horses out there that we are responsible for. And the longer we put this thing off, the more risk we take. It's not in good shape. We've all admitted that for 2 years. We're now in the 3rd year. We still are figuring out what to do with bad electricity. And I just want to get something moving. This is a Sunnyvale character. We talk it to death, but we never get anything done. Let's get it done, and if we have to split it with the 4B, we've all got $20,000 apiece. But by the same token, that puts us into another meeting, another discussion as we go through budget amendments. And every day that goes by is another day of liability.
Could we say that if 4B funded this portion of it in the interest of moving forward quickly, that it doesn't mean that 4B is on board with paying 100% of the rest of the project?
I'll give my thought. I think I was part of the previous council when council did talk about splitting the expenses. So in the big picture, just me opinions, right? I know I'm not opposed to the entire council, but I did get the same conversation. Or we did not choose to buy this property. Council encouraged. Probably did buy that. It's part of it.
Yeah, I would just add to some of the comments there. I agree with some of the comments about, you know, the history and the splitting 50-50, but I also agree with Mr. Wade that I'd just really like to see this project moved along. It's been going on. We bought it almost 3 years ago, and we were talking about it for the 3 years prior. So I think we have an 8-year term on the 4B board, and so I'd really like to see something done on this before my 8 years is up. So I'm already in year 6, so.
That's a fair expectation.
You know, I'm going to make another comment here, step on any toes that I have to, not intentionally. You know, 4B was created when I was the mayor, and it was recognized as Parks and Recreation. And it's taken on a few other legal actions over the years, but it's still, in my mind, it's primarily Parks and Recreation. Now, things have changed. We've eliminated almost completely 4A because 4B has accepted economic development. We recognize at the council level anyway that we are under some tremendous financial burdens from drainage and roads. We can split this cost. That's not a problem. We've all got money to do this project with. But if we take $200,000 or $250,000 or $300,000 out of our budget, that's money out of roads and drainage that we're doing. Or we go borrow more money. Now, I don't know what 4B intends to do with all of their money. I know it's Parks and Recreation, which we need. I know it's economic development, which we can get. But we also have other additional funding sources for 4B that we've never put into place. So I'm very sensitive to increasing the financial burden upon the town. Yeah, we can borrow more money, but we just borrowed more money and we're fixing to borrow some more. So that comes out of tax dollars. It doesn't come out of sales tax dollars. So I would think that would be a large discussion that we have, and we try not to get bogged down in whether it's 50-50 or 25-75. We're doing what's right for the town with the resources that we have. And I have to look at the entire picture, not just my bank and your bank. Hope I didn't step on too many toes.
I fully agree with your statements, but at the same time, I don't need to be lectured on an agreement that was 50-50 when we made it, and we were called to a special meeting and told to buy this land 100%, and then it was agreed to 50-50 at the time. So I am fine with moving forward if 4B decides in our meeting tomorrow night to fund the project that's here today, because again, it's going to help us identify whether or not this project makes valid sense moving forward. But when it comes to identifying the funding for the total cost of doing this big project, for whatever's going to go on in that part, obviously y'all have to approve it. But at that point in time, I think it probably does make sense for something like this to potentially go to the voters unless it's going to just come straight out of the line item budget that we've already all agreed to. But until we know what the true costs are, until we know what is viable to do on that site, I'm in agreement that we should move forward. But when it comes to what was agreed to years ago and then trying to force it on us at this point in time, I don't like that.
Mayor, I don't have any problems with, it sounds like there's an agreement splitting it. I think that seems to be probably an agreement with everybody so far. I personally don't have a problem with that.
I think the splitting is the final cost, not the initial
We're
cost.
talking, but I think we're talking about just the 39,000.
I think I heard differently.
Is that what we're talking about, just this design money right here? Or are we
Total
talking about-
cost.
I think probably, like what Nikki said, is probably paying entire thing, but take into account that when we come to the bigger project.
Yeah.
Did I say that right, Nikki?
Yeah, I was saying that in the interest of time, me personally, I think 4B should fund the $40,000 of this initial part, 100%, but in the future, we need to discuss how the total cost of the project will be split. I'm not saying it has to be 50-50 from my opinion, I'm just saying that it needs to be discussed.
Well, and at that time, maybe we can take a holistic approach and take a look at how we're going to manage the property going forward. Maybe manage isn't the right word, but you know, to Councilmember Allen's points about, you know, sort of what is the vision with how the property is going to work going forward. But we can't, I don't think it makes sense to have that conversation until we even see what can be done. So, so maybe, you know, we cover the design fee. Then once we get to that point, then we all come back together, talk about future costs, what we're going to build, how we're going to manage it, and cover those big items that I don't think we have to cover today.
Mr. Reddy, I comment or something? You want to say something?
I'm hanging on for a second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. The additional discussions or thoughts on this one. So what I'm hearing, and I'm not suggesting it, what I'm hearing is it's going to cost us $39,200 plus possibly $3,000 to be after discussion with the staff. And town manager recommended some portion as contingency for things they find during development services discussion. What would be a number, Susan? 10%? What would be a good number?
I think 10%.
10%. Okay, not to
Do you think,
exceed
David?
10%. Now, what I thought I heard is 4B has $250,000 and this expense will be covered, this initial expenses will be covered with that funding. And we will talk about the next phase expenses when the right time comes. Did I hear anything different? We're going to take some public comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, thanks for discussion. I'm going to open up the open up this time for public comments. If anyone from the audience would like to come forward and speak to 4B or council, please come forward. The county already cleared.
Hi, Kara.
Good evening, Councilman.
Kara Ranta, 372 South Larkin. Thank you all for the time that you've all spent, discussing this, considering it. Back when I was on council and we first discussed the idea of purchasing the property, I was in favor of it because of the choices that were there at that time. Keeping the horses there was a much more desirable choice compared to the other choices that were given to us. And one of the reasons is because of the outpouring of town residents as to the character of this property and what it means to our town. And the way I've kind of described how I see this situation is similar to in other communities. They have a historic district, or they have maybe a natural preserve, some sort of nature preserve, forest preserve, things like that. Those are things that Sunnyvale doesn't have. What do we have to preserve that speaks to the people who live here and even the people who just visit or drive through? This is something that I think Sunnyvale is known for historically, and a piece of its character that is important. Even if it's not the same as it used to be, 20 years ago, it's a little kernel of, more of a, just a hopeful kernel of what we used to have and trying to keep some of that. I know that the idea of the funding and everything is all a complicated part to figure out later, but I appreciate the time going into it, and I appreciate just giving the time to let me speak. And if you have any questions for me, I'm on the committee because I do have experience with horses, but I don't want to ever be considered like the horse expert. I think that's something that the people that are keeping their horses there will have their own decisions to make that are, that need to be considered before any kind of operating procedures are decided. And I think that's one thing I wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Ms. Randa, for your service to the Glacier Trail Committee as well as the council over the years. Thank you. Are there any additional comments from the audience? No one is coming forward, so I'm going to close the public comments. Susan, is it a decision now, or is
Yes,
it
sir.
going, or we get a consensus then?
So,
Before we make the decision, we come back to council.
yeah, actually, the way it's on the agenda is that the 4B would vote. I would recommend that they vote first because, normally the sequence is they vote on something, then it comes to you all. So if they vote first, then you all could vote. I put it on their agenda for tomorrow, but it was really just to debrief from this meeting and discuss any steps forward. So it was my intention that they would vote tonight and you would vote tonight.
So if they choose to vote, right, and they got to vote one way or other, the motion will be to make a decision on the pre-development activity of the track property and to award the contract to Huff Associates for an expense not to exceed, 39,200 plus 10 plus labor to 42.
39 plus 4,000.
3,000, right? So can I say 42.2?
That's good, sir. Thank you.
49.4, right? Good.
Is that right, sir?
46 to, you got 10% contingency.
Right. Okay, so you're including that.
That's $4,200.
Right, plus 10%?
On top of the 42,000, it's 46,200.
Okay, 40. So for not to exceed 46,500. How
Well,
about
I think the contingency is for the actual construction.
that?
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think what he's suggesting is if, in the event that one of these other items that are on the additional services were to arise, we would already have it pre-approved to do it. That's what he's giving us, the kind of the ability to increase to purchase one of these only if needed. But to start with, we'd have the 39 plus the 3,000 in expenses.
Okay, gotcha.
So you talked about the fire loop, I think that's part of the things.
No, no, we're not including the fire part, right?
We are not, okay. Okay, so I think, Mr. Giordano, you have
So
a
what's
motion,
the,
right?
what's the final number?
I think we just said 46.
46,500.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
But our contract with them would be for the $39,040 plus the
So
3,000.
you're authorizing the
Plus
town
the
manager,
10%.
right?
Right?
What'd you say?
It's the 39,000 plus 3,000 plus 10%.
You're right, the contract with them is 39,000 plus the 40, plus the 3,000 that he says is probably expenses. And then the council's just saying if, one of these other services is needed, they're authorizing us to spend the money if needed. But this contract is only for the 39,040 plus the 3,000.
Right, which does not include
42,000.
anything for the fire.
Well, I think that was one of the examples of the additional services that just dependent upon what they find out, there might be a study or additional service needed.
Right, I understand, but that design fee is over $5,000, so 46.5 is not going to get us there, is what I was trying to say.
So the question is, right, so I understand the 46.5, right?
Right.
Mr. Ray, you want to say something?
Yeah, so the contract, as I understand it, is for, as originally presented, for 39,040, plus the potential for another 3,000 in expenses. I think what the council is proposing is that we give the staff an additional 10% leeway to cover these other additional items that may have to be considered, such as the fire lane, which is items number 21 and 22 on the list. We don't know if we're going to have to expend that money now, but we're giving them some flexibility to go up another 10%, which is $4,204, or how the mayor wants to round it up to 42.5, but, I'm sorry, 46.5.
46.5.
So I think the motion is to award the contract as proposed with the authorization to the town manager to exceed it by 10% in the case of these other items that may have to be added.
Did that answer it, Sarah?
And not really, because it still doesn't cover the $5,040 for the fire line design. That's all I was trying to say.
Okay, I think you might be, are you looking at the construction detail versus?
That's a proposed
Yeah.
bid, that's not a cost.
Well, that's what I said earlier, but then someone said that that was the design fee for that park, so.
Yeah, I think that's what you're looking at this, right? We're looking at this document.
I'm looking at both. So,
Okay, but what we're discussing is just if he needs to do additional work to prep us for that, then we're building in a little extra money so we don't have to come back to get that done.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion to accept the bid by Hoff and Associates for the $39,000 plus the $3,000 plus or minus 10%, but not to exceed $46,500.
Motion.
Motion made by member Eldridge,
Second.
seconded by member Anthony. All those in favor? Passed unanimous.
Councilor, I'm going to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giordano. I'm going to ask council to make a motion. Say a motion, ask Mr. Giordano. Keep it simple. Is that good, Susan?
Yes, sir.
Can I have a motion?
Make a motion to accept the proposal as proposed.
Motion made by Mr. Freeman to approve the motion that's made. For a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Crock. Everyone heard the motion? Any additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed? Motion passed 5-0. Mr. Egan and Mr. Finch are absent. So I think that's the last item, right? So Rachel, you said the right motion is to for 4B to 4B to what?
Adjourn. They need a motion to
Yes, and then
adjourn,
we recess.
and then you'll recess.
Mr. Giordano?
At this time,
Call for a motion to adjourn.
oh, can I get a motion to adjourn the 4B joint meeting with town council?
Motion.
Motion made by member Eldred, seconded by member Weiss. All those in favor to adjourn? Adjourns at 6:38.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramsey, do I need to get a motion also for recess?
You don't need a motion for recess, you just recess it.
Okay. Council, the time is 6:38. I'm going to recess this meeting, the Rockville Town Council, the council meeting for January 30th. So we'll get back to it at 7 p.m. Thank you. Thank you.